If you like to entertain, it can be useful to have a couple of classic cocktails on hand for any occasion. And no cocktail is more classic than a martini. So we start off with 2 ounces of London dry gin. Now, a classic martini is always made with gin rather than vodka. And that's because gin has so much more intrinsic character. To make gin, you start off with a neutral grain spirit, basically vodka, and you infuse it with botanicals. That's herbs, spices, barks, and roots that give it a very distinctive character. And vodka just doesn't have that. I like a London dry gin, and it's known for being citrus and juniper forward in its botanicals. But you could easily use a spicier Plymouth gin or a sweeter, less botanical forward Old Tom. But here, London dry. Next, we add a ½ ounce of dry vermouth. Now, you always use dry rather than sweet vermouth when you're making a martini. Now, just because it's dry vermouth doesn't make it a dry martini. Rather, the wetness or dryness of a martini depends on the proportion of gin to vermouth. Now, it could range from a very wet drink, which could be equal parts gin and vermouth, to something dry, which might be 6 parts gin to 1 part vermouth. Or bone dry, which might just be a drop of vermouth. Or you could go the Winston Churchill route, who proclaimed you should pour the gin whilst glancing across the room at a bottle of vermouth. I'm going for the drier side, 4-to-1 is good for me. Notice I'm using a jigger, because that way, once you find the proportions you like, you can reproduce it every time. So, notice I'm using a mixing glass here, and that's because a martini, classically, is a stirred drink. So shaking or stirring a drink does 3 main things. It combines the ingredients, it chills it, and it dilutes it. But shaking is much more violent than stirring. So a shaken drink tends to be colder, more dilute, and because of all the agitation, it's cloudier with a slightly lighter texture. Whereas a martini, the hallmark of a good martini is that it should be completely clear, smooth, with a rich, viscous texture. It's almost oily, and it's very luxurious if you get the proportions just right. So I'm going to fill my mixing glass 3/4 full with ice. Now, I'm using 1-inch cubes here, but pretty much any ice will work as long as it's not crushed, because crushed ice melts too quickly and will over-dilute your drink. Now, to stir a drink requires a particular technique, and to that, you need a bar spoon. And this is custom made to give you the smooth chilling without the agitation that you really want when you stir a drink. So to hold it, you need to hold it almost like a pen, and then you rest the neck of it in the crook between your thumb and your index finger. We place the spoon in the glass with the curved side of the spoon up against the glass, and as you rotate your wrist, the spoon should just glide smoothly round the inside of the glass without any agitation. And you can see there's almost no sound there. Now, you really want to make sure this is diluted to the right level. If you dilute it too much, it becomes watery. If you don't dilute it enough, you won't taste the botanicals as fully. About 30 seconds should do it. Now, the ideal temperature for a martini is something like 32 to 35 degrees Fahrenheit. And 30 seconds should get you there or thereabouts. Now, in order to keep your drink colder for longer, it's a good idea to use a chilled martini glass. So I like to keep mine in the freezer, and then you can just grab it when you're ready to serve it. So I've got my chilled glass. I'm going to take my Hawthorne strainer. I'm going to pop it on top of my mixing glass, and then we're just going to pour it in. That looks pretty clear. You can give it a little snap to make sure you get all your cocktail. Now, a martini needs a garnish, and I love green olives. I find that their salty, savory character really complements and offsets the sweeter botanicals of the gin. So to pull out an olive from a deep jar, a bar spoon can be very useful. So we simply thread our olives, 1, 2, 3, and just drop it in your drink. Now, some people like a twist of lemon. So for that, you simply need a vegetable peeler and just shave off a thin swathe of the zest. Try and avoid as much of the bitter white pith as possible. And then we're going to squeeze, or we're going to express the oils over our drinks. To express the citrus, hold it between your thumb and index finger and give it a little squeeze. And sometimes you can even see a mist of the oil spreading out over your drink. You can take the zest and you can just run it round the rim of the glass for even more flavor. Now, the zest has pretty much given up most of its flavor now, so you could discard it, or if you like the look of it, you can just drop it straight in. And if you don't like choosing between garnishes, just go for both. A martini is actually very customizable. You could absolutely go for a vodka martini if you like, or a Vespa, best of both worlds, which is equal parts gin and vodka. You can make it dirty by adding some olive brine, or if you substitute a pickled onion for the olive, that's a Gibson. However you like your martini, just remember it should be strong, smooth, and crystal clear. To do that, it needs to be stirred, never shaken.